Football cards have been climbing in value. If you're looking to buy, it could be now or never. Let's data dive. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Data Dive powered by Market Movers. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as Teapot, and this week I am getting back into some NFL football. And while the buzz is all around the draft this week, I think it's a perfect time to take a look at the players who actually might be making an impact in this upcoming season to see who might be a buy right now and who might be a sell. As always, this video is brought to you by Market Movers. Visit marketmoversapp.com and use promo code DIVE for your first 7 days free. Now let's get into the data. All right, before I get into this, full disclaimer, I am going to provide some of my own conjecture and opinion and commentary on these players and their cards. Do your own research. I'm not an oracle. I'm giving my opinion just like if you and I were having a beer and shooting the breeze. So take it with a grain of salt and let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And as of recording this video, I do not own any of the cards that will be discussed today, so full disclaimer with that. Now let's get right into it. And the first thing that I want to look at, I kind of went through and stratified a lot of these players into tiers. Obviously in football, you could be buying a multitude of different positions, but a lot of the focus tends to be on the quarterbacks. And so for the purposes of trying to keep this video short-ish, I lasered in on quarterbacks. And let's start with who I think are the top 5 in the league. And I think it's pretty clear at this point, these are the top 5 quarterbacks right now. Number 1 would be Patrick Mahomes, and I'm just looking at their stats. This is from the last 2 seasons. So the last 2 years for each of these guys respectively. You've got Mahomes at the top, I think pretty clearly in a class of his own at this point, especially after last year's Super Bowl championship. And then you've got, maybe in no particular order with these 4 guys, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, and Jalen Hurts. I sorted by touchdown. Obviously, Hurts had more of a breakout last season, especially with the touchdown passes. I think he had 6 more touchdown passes, 3 fewer interceptions than 2 years ago. He obviously is a big rushing threat, can run the ball. So he's kind of a dual threat. Josh Allen does a little bit of that too. Mahomes, to a lesser extent, is more of a passing and then running quarterback. But you've got 78 touchdowns. You can see the QB ratings here, the passer ratings here, the number of interceptions. And then obviously if you look at per game stats, just because the number of games played did vary a little bit. Mahomes at the top, throwing for nearly 300 yards a game and 2.3 touchdowns with just 0.7 interceptions. So just kind of a frame of reference to tee this up to the next piece that I want to look at, which is right here. And what I did here was I took some way too early rankings for the 2023 NFL season from NBC Sports, from this website 33rd Team. I honestly just Googled it and looked for a couple of frames of reference to layer them in, and then I ranked them for myself, and I only did what I thought was maybe the top 16 or so quarterbacks in the league, starting quarterbacks next season, and then I averaged them out and sorted it here in that order. So what I've done is I've kind of put them into tiers. So like I said, I think Mahomes is in a tier of his own. Then I think in the next category, you've got Burrow, Hurts, and Allen for sure. Herbert, to me, kind of toes the line. And he toes the line just because the winning, isn't always there. And his situation with the team is kind of in question. So I put him here. I think you could move him down into this category. I think you could move him up. And then I've got Lamar Jackson and Trevor Lawrence in that next category. Lamar, obviously, these are 2 players heading in very different directions in terms of their sports card prices and their trajectories. Lamar obviously had that incredible MVP season. He's very talented, but the weapons around him in Baltimore haven't been outstanding. Nobody knows if he's even still going to be with the Ravens. We'll see what happens. So these 2 guys I've kind of got in this category, and then everybody else down below that. I think you could kind of come somewhere down to here and say that all these players are in the same category, again, moving in different directions in their career. And what I did was I put their price for a PSA 10, either Optic Holo or Topps Chrome Refractor. So those 2 cards kind of, to me, compare in terms of legacy when the set transitions happened between Panini and Topps. So Mahomes, no surprise, at $2,400. Josh Allen's next at $1,150. A lot of that, I think, has to do with 2 things. There was a ton of hype around Allen last year. So his prices are still sort of being held up because there's not this huge cratering effect. He didn't have a bad year. He just didn't win the Super Bowl, which was essentially a big disappointment for people buying his cards. It's also a very low pop card when you compare it to some of these others, and we're going to look at that in a moment. The one that stands out here to me, there's actually 2 that stand out to me the most. Jalen Hurts his cards have been on the up. They've been going up, generally speaking, over the last year. Now, he did see some price declines on some of his cards since the Super Bowl, others not so much. I think people are still very high on Hurts, but at $325 with an MVP runner-up last season and making it to the Super Bowl and being basically one fumble away from winning the Super Bowl, he played essentially perfect aside from that fumble. Compare the price of his card to Burrow and to Justin Herbert, obviously from the same draft class. That's a really interesting comparison point when you're thinking, okay, what's the potential for this card versus those others? A couple of others that stand out to me, Trevor Lawrence at $550. This has everything to do with pop counts. And then if I come all the way down here and I'm looking for, where is he? Justin Fields, right here. $310 for Justin Fields, $250 for Lamar Jackson. This is all about, again, two players who are moving in completely different directions in terms of public impression and appearance and potential for their career. People are very high on Fields. I'm not one of those people. I did not see nearly enough last season in terms of his ability to pass to convince me that he's that kind of an investment. Others from my team, big Bears fans, everybody who is a Bears fan loves Fields. It's going to remain to be seen. Frankly, I'm not particularly rooting for him as a Lions fan. I'd like to see the Lions start to win that division, but there are a lot of people who are very high on him, and so his prices have been rising, whereas Lamar, people are not so high on. Fun fact, my biggest loss on a card that I've ever purchased was this exact card a few years ago when I bought Lamar's Optic Holo PSA 10, I think around $2,100, and ended up selling it like a year and a half later for like 800 bucks. I'm glad I sold it when I did because it's now down to $250. So now looking at price movements, that's what I'm doing here, is I've put in basically the Optic Holo and the Topps Chrome Refractor PSA 10s for all these players. We don't have a positional filter yet, so you can't filter explicitly by quarterback, but sometimes it's nice to see these other cards and other players as a frame of reference. So I'm looking at like the last 15 years of rookie cards, and scrolling down, you can see the price movements from the last 90 days. And here's Mahomes at the top, 2.4K. I'm just going to give you some thoughts on some of these players, and I think I might do a follow-up episode next week. I haven't quite decided yet on some of the other positional players and some kind of funny comparisons with where the prices stand, so stay tuned for that. So I like when I'm on this screen to pop this open and you get this little slide out. And this gives you a lot of quick information. And then I can go in and I can chart this card. Now, in order to make a decision about buying a card and whether or not you want to buy it now, it is not enough to know who the player is, what the pop is, where it ranks in terms of value to other players. You also need to know where that card has been historically and to be able to see. I like to look for a historical precedent for a card to say, okay, where has this card been going more than the last 90 days, more than what eBay will show me, more than what other websites will show me. And so for this card in particular, Mahomes over the last 365 days, he came down here. And we know that the market has come down a ton in that time frame, right? The whole card market has continued to come down. So unsurprisingly, Mahomes came down, and then he's pretty much held steady. This most recent sale, and the reason why it looked like that card is up 24% or whatever it said, is just because of one sale recently. But I like to look at this price trend history and not fixate too much on a single last comp, but instead to look at where has this thing been averaging out. And you can see that he's really been averaging out right here, right in this ballpark. Let's see, somewhere around $2,000 for this card. So if I were buying Mahomes and I think, hey, he's, top tier, I actually like this card, his Optic Holo, personally, maybe aesthetically, better than his Prism Silver, which, he only has a silver of from that 2017 draft class, doesn't have a Prism base. But I like this card. I think it's a really nice photo. Now, if we come down, like I said, here's the Josh Allen. Really interesting. 2018 football pop counts and print runs were very low across many different products. The Prism Silvers and Prism PSA 10 base cards, very low pop counts specifically from that 2018 class. So that's helping prop the price up of this card. You could also look at this one. Now, the thing with Josh Allen is, I think he now has to win. I think everybody knows Josh Allen is a top 5, maybe top 3 quarterback in the NFL, top 4. He's really good, but he has to win. And he is in a very, very competitive league with Patrick Mahomes, with Joe Burrow. Now Aaron Rodgers is over there, who people think is going to do really well with the Jets. I personally don't think he's going to do very well with the Jets. And then you've got Herbert and you've got all these other quarterbacks that you're competing against. They're going to have to win. If he wins, his prices could go up. I don't know that they're going to be able to do that. So over the last 365 days with Allen, you've seen him coming down, 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 down. Now the question you might want to ask yourself is, look at the schedule for Buffalo. I haven't done this personally. Look at the schedule for Buffalo and see who do they play early in the season next year. Do they play the Jets? Do they play the Patriots? Do they play their divisional rivals? Do they play any of the other big teams like the Chiefs? And if they beat those teams and they start out hot, Allen could get some momentum back behind his cards. And I say that specifically because he's been on this downward trajectory. So now let's shift over and I'm looking at, I'll skip Gronkowski. So Trevor Lawrence, I'm going to finish with Trevor Lawrence and I'm going to finish with Justin Fields, those two guys. So I'll come back around to them. But look at the pop count at 119. I would not be buying an Optic Holo or a Prism Silver PSA 10 of either of those guys from 2021. And the reason is there's going to be more. There's going to be more PSA 10s of these cards surfacing. And when that happens, it's going to spread out the demand for the card. It's going to create more availability and it's going to create price compression so that those cards are not as valuable. Even if Trevor Lawrence is very, very good next year, I think the availability of more of these cards is going to cause issues. That's why he's right now more expensive than Joe Burrow. And there's nobody, I don't think there's anybody in the world who would say right now that Trevor Lawrence is a better or more established quarterback than Joe Burrow, other than maybe some Jags fans. So look at Joe Burrow here, for example. I'm very high on Joe Burrow. I think he's probably the second best quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion, at least right now. And his card has seen kind of some fluctuation. So unlike Mahomes, we saw all the hype, then it dipped down here. And obviously, they end up losing to the Chiefs. They end up losing in the playoffs and the Chiefs make the Super Bowl. So his card has kind of, done this over this time frame. If you're looking at Burrow, I think price-wise, you look at a guy like Josh Allen and you look at where Mahomes is on his card. The difference is, again, you got to take pop counts into consideration. It's about double for Burrow. But I think that would have stabilized by now way more than somebody like Lawrence or Fields. And then just continuing to scroll down here, all the way down here, like I said, you've got Jalen Hurts at $325. And if I look at his card over time, it's going to be obviously a different story because there was a lot of enthusiasm about Hurts last year. So we see it kind of trending in this price range here. You've got it around 200, up to 250. And then there was enthusiasm about Hurts last year at the National, and in that period after the National up to the regular season, he pretty much lived up to it. There was this dip, then they make it to the Super Bowl, he sees the high point, and now, like you would expect, you see some price decline over that time frame. So if I look at, let's say, the last 90 days on Hurts, you've seen this slightly downward trajectory. For me, if I'm picking any one of these guys, and I might act on this, I'm giving you full transparency, I think Hurts is probably the best buy right now in terms of price point of any of these guys. My one question is, will he actually continue to go up between now and when the season starts? I think there's still going to be a lot of hype and enthusiasm around him, especially going into the National. I think he's in a much better position in the NFC than some of these other quarterbacks are, all competing against each other in the AFC. To me, the Eagles are probably the favorites again, or should be the favorites in the NFC to go next year, and we'll see what kind of offensive weapons they get in the draft. So what I wanted to do was jump over here, and I've got this 2020 class just as an example, and I wanted to look and see last year from the Super Bowl until the start of the NFL season, roughly, what did their card prices do? And you can see two different stories here. I'm looking at price changes by percentage, and you've got some different situations here. So Tua was very hot. His prices started to go up early. People were very enthusiastic. It's like, hey, they're getting Tyreek Hill. He's got weapons. They're going to do all these things. And then, unfortunately, we know about the injuries with Tua. Jalen Hurts is another guy who obviously was seeing enthusiasm, but it was later. You can see that green line here. The enthusiasm was much later in the year. People started getting really excited about him. Justin Herbert, flat the entire time, flat. There was just no reason to get super excited about Justin Herbert. And I think that that's going to be the case now with Josh Allen, and maybe also still with Justin Herbert leading into the season. And then Joe Burrow and Jordan Love actually went down significantly in price. Jordan Love, obviously, because Rodgers didn't get traded and was staying with the Packers at that time. And Joe Burrow, because there was so much hype around him at the Super Bowl that he just started to come down, 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 down. So what about over the last few months since the Super Bowl basically ended? Let's look at last 60 days up until now. And I come down here and we can see Burrow's still essentially holding flat. Jalen Hurts on this particular card holding flat. Herbert slightly up. Jordan Love, he's definitely starting to move up much faster now that he's going to be the starting quarterback. And Tua actually flat more or less, but his cards have been seeing a downward decline since the injuries. And you can see the price differences here now, where Tua was actually starting to compete with these guys in price last year. Now he's all the way down here at $152. So this 2020 draft class, in terms of quarterbacks, is the most stacked one, arguably that we've seen in a while in terms of how these quarterbacks are playing. It might not be a bad idea to look at sealed products for that if that's your thing. Jeff often refers to this as kind of the mutual fund investment approach. And so what I did is I just took Select, Optic, and Prism, Hobby, and First Off the Line to see what's been happening with these prices over the last year as these quarterbacks have continued to emerge. And it's actually really interesting. I haven't done a deep dive into what a rip is like on these products or what types of things you get out of them, but I'm assuming there must have been some discovery about First Off the Line Select that led to people saying, hey, this is a really good value in terms of what you get out of the product and guaranteed hits for it being FOTL. That one is up to $3,000 and has gone up 46.3%. That's actually the most expensive product on this list. It's even more expensive than Prism First Off the Line, which is sitting at $2.6K and has actually seen some price reduction. So you could look at one of these. I would do your research to know exactly what you get out of these products, watch some breaks from YouTube, and kind of try to understand what that looks like, because over time people are going to be really astute, and that's going to drive the price in terms of what they're going to want to pay for when you start stacking all these products up against each other. Now, let's jump back to price movements. I said that I wanted to wrap up with Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. I said I would not buy those sort of commodity cards in a PSA 10 and pay that huge premium because there's a limited supply. I wouldn't do that with Prism Silvers, Optic Hollows, Select Silvers, any of those cards, those non-numbered parallels, or even the base cards, frankly. If you have the money and you're really serious about wanting to invest in one of these guys, I would buy like a case hit non-numbered card, or maybe one of their numbered color parallels if you can afford it, because those ones are going to stabilize over time and be competing against like cards from previous years. So I stacked that up. And here you've got the Color Blasts, you've got Stained Glass, you've got other stained glass, you've got Downtowns, you've got Kabooms. Those are the types of cards that people look at, and you can come into price movements and look at the prices on each of these. And then I came over here and I just stacked up the Kaboom prices for a handful of different guys to see, how do their prices compare one to another. So for example, here I've got Lamar Jackson's Kaboom. These are all in PSA 10, other than the Trevor Lawrence here, which is raw, simply because there wasn't a good PSA 10 sale on this card. But at 2.2K for Lamar, you see the upside here at 7.23K and at 7.1K for Burrow and Herbert on the PSA 10s. So if I'm looking at Trevor Lawrence and I'm saying, I think he's going to be competing for one of those top 3, 4, 5 spots in the NFL for quarterback, that's the upside, right? If you buy raw, if you buy a PSA 10, again, why am I not comparing all raw? Because these cards just don't transact that often, and looking at the price points isn't exactly apples to apples when it's been a long time since these cards have sold. So similar story here, Jordan Love, PSA 10. I'm just gonna say it right now. I would not be buying Jordan. I'd be selling Jordan Love hard right now. If I had any Jordan Love cards, I'd be selling them while I can make profit right now, while there's hype. I don't think the Packers are going to do very well in the NFC North last year. They might finish next year. They might finish last. And if that's the case, that's going to be really brutal for Jordan Love's card prices. I like to see more of an established play in NFL quarterbacks before I start spending a lot of money and speculating. Again, risk versus reward. And then here's another one, Jalen Hurts. Again, half the price, less than half the price of a couple of these guys. I think there's upside on a card like this. This just sold. This person might be sitting pretty if Jalen Hurts repeats what he did last year. So let me know, who are you high on going into next year? Who are you most concerned about? Let me know down in the comments. And while you're there, do me a favor and hit that like button and make sure to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, happy investing, keep on collecting, and make sure to have fun.